Here we go. Hey everybody, how's it going? Dan Shinder here on Drum Talk TV with yet another interview as we wind down November. I can't even believe I'm saying November. Tell us where you're watching from. I'm coming to you from my office here in Globe, Arizona, 100 miles east of Phoenix, up in the mountains, away from the madness. Well, most of the madness. My wife's here, so there's some madness where it's a lot cooler. And we've got Les DeMerle on board for the very first time, coming to us on vacation in Myrtle Beach by way of Amelia Island. We'll get into that. Les, how are you?
Fine, thank you, Dan. Thanks so much for having me, man. I'm honored to be on your show.
Oh, thank you. I am so honored to have you. And folks, if you're not familiar with Les's career, first let me tell you just a bit of two ends of the spectrum from Les's career. One, in 1970, he replaced Buddy Rich in Harry James Orchestra and was with the band until about 1983. So think about that for a minute. Buddy Rich is leaving a band. Who do you get to replace him? Les DeMerle. And then if we move fast forward by way of teleporting, Les was part of the wonderful Modern Drummer tribute that they did. Our friends at Modern Drummer did that wonderful tribute to Neil Peart. He was part of that as well. And because I never use notes on the show, I did prepare some notes that I'm going to peek out over here because Les's career is so illustrious. I didn't want to forget anything. So let's just go down the list real quick, then we'll all take a deep dive. And remember, tell us where you're watching from, folks. I'll be checking comments soon. Grammy Award-winning big band recording with the Harry James and the King James version, obviously. Writer of Jazz Rock Fusion Volume 1. That wasn't enough, so he wrote Volume 2 as well. Published by Hal Leonard. We all know Hal Leonard. Artistic director and founder at the Amelia Island Jazz Festival, a not-for-profit organization that distributes annual scholarships to high school musicians. Writer of Jazz Rock Fusion Volume 1 and 2, published... he did that twice, so I read it twice. 20 Leader Recordings, newest release in 2021, coming with Hot Night in Venice, featuring dynamic Les DeMerle Jazz Quartet with vocalist Bonnie Eisel, who I know you've known for a while. Recorded live at the Venice Jazz Club in Italy. Les spent 70s, 80s, and 90s doing up to 50 clinics a year around the world. That kept you busy. And I'm sure that kept your chops up really well for all the gigs too, right? That's very cool. Currently, Les is teaching live and Zoom sessions from the Les DeMerle Drum Studio in Amelia Island in Florida. And he's also currently scheduled to resume performing when this COVID stuff gets under control with the Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, where his band headlines the world's largest. They needed to get the world's largest cruise ship to hold all the talent of his band, the Harmony of the Seas in the Jazz on 4 Club. Les, what a career. I don't know where to begin, so I'm just going to throw a random dart, okay?
Okay.
Let's start with music. What is it about jazz that has allowed that genre in its many forms to really perpetuate through the decades and still be relevant, whether we're listening to modern jazz fusion or going way back to kind of the bebop and post-bebop era and everything in between? What is it about jazz?
Well, the main word is improvisation.
Right.
Improvisation. So, where when you really track the music back to the early days, say the blues, people like Robert Johnson, before they even had drum sets playing this music, the guitar players and improvised, there was that melody and then there was improvisation. So no matter what kind of music you hear today, you're going to hear some improvisation in there, which is the thread of jazz,
Right.
and that's what, for me, when I first heard it as a kid live, the very first experience for me was hearing Lionel Hampton at 16 years old live. And then I realized that when the guys were reading the chart, that was the first chorus, say, of a tune. And then a saxophone player would stand up for 5 choruses with no music and tell a story. And I thought to myself, well, man, this is jazz, because this is true improvisation. What he's playing, he'll never play again. So it's here and it's gone, and that's kind of like what I live for every day. If there's like 4 bars in my day, whether it be on a practice pad here in a hotel room or behind the kit, and I'm doing something just a little different from my jazz background, that makes my day. So I think it's in one word, Dan, it would be improvisation, and of course on top of that, swing.
Yeah, the swing, the feel. I mentioned to you before we went live that jazz, even the sad songs are freaking happy and make you feel good just because of that swing in the music.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's positive energy in that, I mean, there's really positive energy in interacting, just like we're interacting now with our talk, it's a similar thing. If we had horns in our mouths and we were playing at the same time, right, and you say, so, and I say, and man, that's energy, man. That's some serious, but again, it's in the pocket,
Yeah.
That's the stuff that whether you like jazz or not, like when I do clinics, I ask a hand raise. How many people out there like jazz? And maybe a third of the audience will put their hands up. I'll say, okay, I think I'm going to win you over in the next hour,
Yeah.
And they'll play something that they can relate to, like just a blues that's in the pocket. And they'll say, okay, everybody clap your hands. They didn't even know that was jazz. To them, it might be a form of rock and roll,
Yeah.
And you just take it from there. But it's the positive vibe of being able to improvise and realize that that's only going to happen for that moment, and bam, hopefully you go on to another thing.
Yeah, and the key word when you mention improvisation, all music is storytelling, even music that's written, rehearsed, recorded in a structure. But when music is live, whether it's jazz, whether it's metal, whether it's Dixieland, whatever it is that improvisational element that's the true storytelling, because the musician is truly just emptying out what they're feeling in that moment, which is what's great about making it so different every night. There's no way we feel exactly the same way. Even if we're happy every night, there's different elements that make that up, and it comes out in our music through improvisation.
Absolutely right, Dan. Yeah.
Let's go back to 1970 when you joined the Harry James Band. How did that come about? Were you recommended? Did you audition? Did you beat Buddy Rich in an arm wrestling tournament? Like, what went on there?
Well, this is a beautiful story. I had a group in 1967, Dan, 3 years prior to joining Harry James, that I had started in New York. I'm originally from New York. I was born in Brooklyn, not far from where Buddy was born, by the way. Oh. He's also a Brooklynite,
Yeah.
And in 1967, I'd already played with Lionel Hampton. I did some things with the Lee Castle Jimmy Dorsey Band. I was playing around New York as a leader with little jazz trios, supper club gigs and whatnot. But I wanted to put a group together that would be like a little big band. So I put an alto saxophone and trumpet band together called Sound 67. And even though I was only about 20 years old in 1967, I hired people like Marvin Stamm on trumpet, who had already played with Stan Kenton and Maynard Ferguson. I had Bill Takis on bass from the Tonight Show band. At that time, they were in New York with Doc Severinsen. And then I had the piano player was Danny Sandage, who had also played with Stan Kenton as a mellophone player and sometimes piano. And my saxophone player was a guy named Arnie Lawrence, who was a phenomenal player that went on to play with Chico Hamilton and people like that. So long story short, this band was started to get recognition around New York, and I was signed by an agency named the Willard Alexander Agency. And they said, the only way we're going to get you the better nightclub gigs is to get you some TV exposure. So they booked me on the Mike Douglas show, which at that time was out of Philadelphia.
Yeah, I used to watch that when I was a kid. I loved the Mike Douglas show.
So this is 67. The first time I did the show, Rosemary Clooney was on that show. And Mike said to me, he says, okay, after you do your song, Les, could you give Rosemary Clooney a drum lesson? Like just some shtick, some shtick. So I said, sure. So Rosie comes over. I give her this little impromptu drum lesson as we go into the commercial. And also Catherine Crosby was on that show, who's Bing Crosby's wife at the time. And Mike Douglas played some bongo drums or something. So we had a little percussion jam. Well, after that show, I got back to my hotel room, and a phone call came in from Willard Alexander. And he says, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "You won't believe this. I got a call from Harry James, and he just saw that show. He watches the show when he's on the road, and he wanted to know who the kid was." So I told him your name, and he said, "I want that band to open up for me at the Riverboat in 3 weeks. We're going to do 3 weeks in New York. I want him to play the cocktail hour, and then I'll come on with my band." Well, his band included Buddy Rich,
Yeah.
So this was, I would have paid to be there every night to hear Buddy, but here I am being paid to be there as a band leader to be the opening act for Harry,
Wow.
Because I was a band leader, we actually shared the same dressing room. I had it from 5 to 8, and then he started at 8:30 and went to 12:30. So I could use the dressing room and my clothes and tuxedos and all that. And then I'd clear out, and Harry would come in. So he heard me play as a leader, Dan, for 3 weeks, and that's how I got to know Buddy too, and a lot of the other guys on the band. So anyway, at the end of the gig, he said, "Kid, give me your card. If we ever make a change, I just might consider calling you." And I thought that was the greatest honor, even if I didn't get a call,
Yeah.
because you could pick up the phone and call Louis Belson, Jake Hanna, Shelley Mann, Ed Shaughnessy.
Me.
And, the cream of the crop players would drop their hats to be with him the next night on the band. So in the interim, what happened was I'd already played some other gigs around Vegas with Wayne Newton, and he offered me a gig with him. That was a year later at 68 now. So I was making some really good money with Wayne, and he gave me marquee billing because I was doing like these 20-minute drum solos in his shows every night.
Oh, wow.
One night after the show, Harry called me personally. He said, "Les, we're up in Reno, and Buddy Rich just gave notice because he's going to start his own band. So I want you to join my band." He says, "You can be here tomorrow night." I said, "I'm with Wayne Newton in the big room." He says, "You call Wayne, you tell him you're going with Harry James and you're going to replace Buddy Rich." So I called Wayne Newton, and Wayne said, "Okay, you can go with my blessing if you get a sub." So I called, the only guy I knew who might be available was a drummer named Joe Cacuso, who used to be with Tony Bennett, you know. And Tony wasn't working as much in those days, So Joe said, "Oh, I'm going to cover your bases." So he flew out to Vegas, was with Wayne the next night at 8 o'clock at the Frontier Hotel. I flew at 6 o'clock in the morning up to Reno, and I was in Buddy's chair that night at Harrah's up in Reno. So that's how I got with Harry James.
What
I stayed with him.
Great story. Yeah. Yeah, you were there for like 12 years. Yeah.
12 years, yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I want to look at comments and see if we got comments, questions, suggestions, donations. Let's see what we got here. Tell us where you're watching from, everybody. Hey, Claudio, how are you? Seth Cashman says, "Love Les. Have been digging his playing since I was a kid." That's saying a lot because Seth is like 90. No, I'm kidding. Seth says the transfusion, transcendental Wattis.
Watusi, transcendental Watusi, yeah.
Oh, I need new glasses. He also says, saw him at the Sam Ash Drum Expo in New York City, 1984 or 85. He was incredible.
Right,
Do you remember that, Les?
That's right, I do, yeah.
Cool.
That one, Dan, at that concert, I had Joe Morello and Jim Chapin sitting in the front row.
Oh, my God.
And they're both really good friends of mine, And I said to the audience, I said, I can do my thing up here, but I said the real guys are sitting in the front row. These are my heroes,
That's so cool.
Said, how about if we get a few drum sets up here and we'll all three of us play?
Did you?
And all of a sudden, yeah, I did. And then all of a sudden they got some drums and then it was me, Joe Morello, and Jim Chapin all playing together.
Is there a video of this?
Yeah, if he was at that clinic, that gentleman saw that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember that, Les? I mean, Seth, so was there video or film of that?
No, that's fun. In the 80s, Dan. I wish there were, but we did so many. There were some, people took photos, and we had hard copy camera, a little,
Yeah, I'm trying to think back now. I got ahead of myself because I remember having VHS and Beta in the late 80s. So this would have been even before that. Hey, Mike Skinner in South Wales, not New South Wales, the original South Wales.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I hope you're doing well, Mike. And Seth does remember that. How cool. Kevin Gazzara, great friend of mine, says, great to see Les live. Did Les ever collaborate with Martin Drew, asks Mike Skinner in South Wales. Did you ever collaborate with Martin Drew?
Absolutely,
Yeah, tell us
absolutely.
about that.
Oh man, I knew Martin Drew when he played with Oscar Peterson. You know,
Mm.
He was Oscar Peterson's drummer whenever Oscar went to Europe, and I think I met him at Ronnie Scott's, which is a club I played in London on Waldorf Street.
Yeah.
And Martin Drew and Kenny Clare. There's another great muso from England, and also Jack Parnell, who used to be years ago with the Ted Heath Orchestra. All those guys would come to my drum clinics. And then also rock players too, like Bob Henrik, who had his own drum shop right on Waldorf Avenue there. And so, like, you know, there was a camaraderie when I would go over there for Pearl or for Slingerland drums to do clinics in the 70s and 80s, you know.
Oh, that's cool.
You know, there was a great and Peter York, there's another guy who was with the Spencer Davis band, you know.
Yeah.
Peter York, Ashley Wardell, so many guys. And we again, at all my clinics, Dan, I mean, you know, when you're playing and you feel all that energy, like we were talking about before with improvisation, and at the end, I invite almost everybody in the audience, if they can play. I'd have a second set there, and then I'd play fours with everybody in the audience. They'd be a long line, and we'd be burning like here, and then, you know, everybody get a chance to express themselves and have fun, you know. And then sometimes there'd be like a grandma, you know, a grandmother sitting next to the kid that wants to play drums, and she's you know, she's sitting there, and I say, "Come on up, Grandma, and play." She says, "I never played a drum." "That's perfect. Come on up and play." You know,
oh, that's great.
I sit her down, and she just started banging and hitting things wrong. I said, "Did you have fun?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Your lesson is 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Be there on time."
Oh, that's so cool. Do you think that when all this COVID stuff is over, I know that you'll get back to playing live and everything on the cruises. Do you think you'll ever get back to doing clinics?
I hope so, Dan. I mean, I love to do clinics, you know, and as soon as, you know, as soon as COVID is under control, you know, and it's safe to go into, I mean, just think about us. If we go into a drum store now, or a drum or you know, a convention center and do a drum clinic, especially the guys like, just say, Kenny Aronoff and guys like that, who are friends of mine, that'll draw hundreds and hundreds of drummers. And you try to do some of the things that we're talking about. Everybody's touching the same sticks, you know. I mean, there's got to be a lot of, I mean, the whole thing with playing in a mask and all that. It's got to be relaxed, and it's got to be safe for us to get that back to that again. I'm just so grateful at my age that we've had the opportunity to do all this before it happened. I feel very sad for the younger guys who are just trying to get off the ground, that all the work is now diminished because of the pandemic, you know, and the situations. So I'm hoping, I'm praying that we're going to get back to normal so we can all be healthy and safe and be able to do what we love to do best. I mean, play and share the music and make people happy with our sounds, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's rewind a little bit. I'm curious, how would you describe working with Wayne Newton? You know, I lived in Vegas for 13 years, and almost every day drove by his amazing property that's still there. And I saw a documentary of Wayne giving a tour of his place, and he seemed like a very humble, just normal person. Was that the real Wayne?
Absolutely, yeah. Wayne is a country boy, you know. He's from Roanoke, Virginia, and he came up and played Vegas with his brother Jerry Newton as a lounge act first, you know, where they did like something like, you know, 6 p.m. to about 2 in the morning, you know, alternating sets with another lounge act at the Fremont Hotel downtown when he was a kid, you know. And it was Jackie Gleason, actually, the you know, megastar who's Irish, of course, Jackie Gleason. He heard Wayne's version of Danny Boy, and when he played Danny Boy on the guitar and just sang it, it made Gleason cry. And then Gleason put him on the TV shows. So in other words, I guess what I'm trying to say is he came up, he paid his dues, you know.
Yeah, he worked his way up.
You know, he's not one of these overnight successes. You know, he really paid his dues. When I joined him, I was already playing as a jazz drummer, and the guy I replaced was a very fine drummer named Harvey Lang, was more like a country drummer. You know, so he'd be playing like that, and I'd play the same tune with Wayne, but you hear back, And when at first Wayne didn't know what this was about, man. You know?
Where's one?
Yeah. But one was always there, but I had all these subdivisions happening behind him. But then he said to the piano player, who's his conductor, he says, you know that thing DeMerle is doing with his left hand? He said, write that in the guitar part. Let's do that tomorrow night when we do that tune in the guitar. All of a sudden, that whole band started to be looser, and the cats had more to play. And so in other words, I guess what I'm trying to say is I gained his trust, you know. And then it got to the point where I don't know if you can see my hand, but, you know, Wayne would like clap like this, you know, typical. But what I did with a New York vibe was I do a little circular thing, and then I go. So there's a circle, and then there's a 2 and 4.
Yeah.
And the next night in the show, he's singing Dunkashane, and don't you know he's going Dunkashane?
Oh wow!
You know, I turned him into a bebop cat overnight. You know.
Oh, funny.
So we had a great time, and he wrote a book, by the way, and called Once Before I Go, and there's a whole chapter in it of Les DeMerle stories.
Wow! Oh, I gotta get that just for that. That's great.
So I get along great with him. I think he's a great guy. And then when Harry James passed away, Dan, he was the first guy to call me, and he said, what are you going to do now? Because you were with him for 12 years. And I was pretty depressed. I was in New York. I said, man, I was like losing my second father. And he says, once you come out on the road, and I did again. So I went back with him in 83. Oh. And that's what brought me through Chicago, where I met Bonnie, my wife. You know.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
How long have you been married?
30 years now.
Oh, congratulations. That's good. I've been married over 30 years, but not to the same person.
Well, you know.
Let's see. Mike Skinner says the channel is incredible in bringing these. This channel is incredible bringing these giants so close and accessible. Their experiences are an inspiration. Mike, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Hey, Tony Jefferson. Thanks, everybody. Oh, Kevin says, Les, what pulled you out of Chicago to Florida? And before you answer, I got to tell everyone, normally you see me in a Drum Talk TV shirt, and maybe you just see the shoulders and the collar. I'm wearing one of my many tropical shirts in honor of Les because he's a tropical kind of Florida guy. But yeah, what takes you? I would guess simply the weather could be one answer. It could be a gig. Could be the water.
It's a combination of all of the above.
That's good. My dad used to say, just so you know, my dad used to say, you know why people put up with that wind in Chicago? I'd say, why? Just they don't know any different. They think it's like that everywhere.
Right. Well, first of all, Kevin and I, Dan, you know, we go back now to the years when I met him in Chicago. Paul Wertico, the great drummer that was with Pat Metheny.
Yeah, he's been on. Yeah, Pat's great.
Have you had Paul on the show?
Yeah.
Great guy.
Paul's a great drummer, great guy, great stories.
Right. Well, we were doing some clinics together, he and I, at a place called Roselle Music in Illinois, and I had moved there because I actually was on the road with Wayne playing at the Holiday Star Theater in Merrillville, Indiana, when an agent said, "Are you the same Les DeMerle that's in the drum books and whatnot?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Man, if you want to stay over after Wayne's gig, I'll book you at a supper club in Oak Brook called The Flame." Oh. So I put a band together, and I stayed over to do a 13-week supper club gig. Wayne was going to be doing a movie with Chevy Chase that became very popular called Las Vegas Vacation. Yeah. So we were going to be off for 13 weeks while he was making this movie. So it was perfect, you know. So in the course of that gig, the owner asked me to rotate singers, and I auditioned other singers. And one of the singers was my wife, Bonnie Eisel, who came in to audition. So when she started working with me, we decided, okay, now we've got something really unique because I'm coming from a jazz background. I was singing a little bit. She was a pop singer with a Broadway style background, show tunes and that kind of thing. So we put our repertoires together, and now I said, this is a very commercial package now, you know. So instead of just playing jazz clubs, we can look at, you know, resorts and big hotels and maybe conventions and, you know. So she wanted to see if we could get a gig in Florida because her mom had a place in Fort Myers. So, but she could never get Chicago guys to go because they were all the older guys. I said, okay, what we're going to do is let me network and we'll put a young band together. The guys right out of college that want to get out of the cold, they're not married yet. They'll go on the road. So we put a hot young band together. As a matter of fact, Louis Belson recommended the piano player I took with us. His name was Evan Ray.
Oh, wow.
And Louis had just done a clinic at one of the colleges in Chicago and recommended him to me. So we took the band to Florida for that one winter, which was freezing in Chicago. And we played at a place called Sundial Resort on Sanibel Island. And then while we were there, we were getting articles in the paper about my being with the Manhattan Transfer and Wayne Newton. And the Ritz-Carlton was one of the best gigs there. And one of my I was also teaching drums down there at a place called Brett's Music. And he said, the Ritz-Carlton really should know about what you're doing at the Sundial Resort. And so that we invited them to come over and check us out. And then they hired us for these high seasons. So every winter we'd go like January, February, March and play the Ritz-Carlton in Naples. And Bonnie and I actually did get married in Sanibel on that first Florida gig, Wow. So then after those years, they were going to open up a new property in Amelia Island, which is near Jacksonville. And they said, Les and Bonnie, on the way home to Chicago, because we were driving on 95, get off in Amelia Island and see if you like that area. If you do, we'll offer you the house band position. So we got off the freeway and checked it out, and it was a beautiful hotel. And we did 10 years, 6 nights a week in the lounge with the jazz trio. And we also did the corporate events. And then we started to go out of town and put in sub bands while we were out of town. We had our pie and we were eating it too,
Nice. What a great story. Wow. Since you mentioned working with Bonnie, I want to play a clip of the two of you.
Oh, sure. Right, yeah.
Check this out, folks. This is really cool. It's called Love Being Here With You. Check it out. We'll be right back.
I love the East, I love the West, the North and South, they're both the best. But I'd only go there as a guest, 'cause I love being here with you. I love the sea, I love the shore, I love the rocks, and once more, with you there, there'd never be a bore, 'cause I love being here with you. Singing in the shower, laughing by the hour, life is such a breezy game. Any kind of weather, as long as we're together, I really hope you're glad that you came. I like good wine and fine cuisine and candlelight, that's my kind of scene. Baby, if you know what I mean, well, I love being here with you, yeah!
All right, hold your horses, everyone. I don't want to spoil the whole thing. Look up Les DeMerle with Bonnie Isel on YouTube. There's a lot of great stuff there, but that was a great little sampler tray. And again, it's the word that comes to my mind when I see you two and with the quartet play is it's just timeless. It's timeless music. Do you pick the tracks together? Is it stuff that has always been in Bonnie's wheelhouse, or you cut from the same cloth? What's the story about the repertoire?
Oh, that's a great one. Most of the tunes and arrangements, Dan, I come up with for us, and with Bonnie, she also studied music in Brazil,
Oh.
so she's got a whole Brazilian repertoire, and she brings that to the band, and then we also, beside the standards and the classic jazz repertoire now, we also cross over into some rhythm and blues, R&B and funkier stuff and New Orleans style influence stuff. We had Delfio Marsalis last year at our jazz festival, and Delfio asked Bonnie to learn a tune of his called Jazz Party, So things come into the repertoire organically, so to speak.
That's
we
awesome.
might have we have a lot of young players that do the cruise contracts with us now. And, once they learn our basic repertoire, which is very challenging, by the way, then I'll say to those guys, okay, play me something that you really dig playing. What do you sound best on? And where's your head? Who are you listening to?
Yeah.
And they might come up something like the group The Bad Plus, or something that's really hip and contemporary. And I'll say, okay, we can use that. Let's do that. Let's try that. So it's everybody gets the chance to put their little stamp on the band.
That's
and
cool.
I think that's the key to being a good band leader, just like the great Miles Davis bands, when he had when Miles had like Cannonball, Coltrane, Bill Evans, Billy Cobb. I mean, he's not going to tell those guys how to play. Those guys,
Right.
If he didn't talk to you, you were doing it right,
That is the epitome of bringing the smartest business mind into art. In business, the most successful people have surrounded themselves with experts in their field, and that's exactly a great example of that. And you've done it with your band. I have to ask, with Bonnie's pedigree in music and with the Brazilian influence, do you do Girl from Ipanema?
Oh, absolutely.
That's
absolutely.
great. My wife and I used to host a open mic here for 2 years in town, in this tiny little town of 7,000 people. We used to host an open mic, and we would do one piece of music maybe each night, and the rest of it was for everybody else, and we would host it.
Wow.
But she crafted the words from a different gender perspective and called it The Guy from Ipanema.
Yeah.
And I would simply just play it on a hand drum, and it was just the two of us. It's a lot of fun. It's a wonderful song. Let's go way, way back when the earth was cooling. What or who was it that made you say, I gotta play drums?
Oh man, I think it was probably Gene Krupa. Yeah, because when I first heard about Gene Krupa from my drum teacher, Bob Livingston, I was one of those kids, Dan, like most of us, who were always banging on things and picking up knives and forks and playing rhythms, But when I first heard about Gene Krupa, and not only heard about it, but was so taken by his three-star looks and his charisma, his showmanship, and it was just like, oh man, I saw the Gene Krupa story when I was very, very young, the movie,
Oh yeah.
See that in a big theater, and the sound of it, the first time and all the camera angles on Sal Mineo, who played Gene Krupa in the movie. It was just something else. Yeah,
oh, that's really cool.
I think that was probably the first thing. And then once I got into Gene, then of course I learned about Buddy and Louie and Blakey, and then the whole thing went like that.
That's awesome. I'm just checking comments real quick. Mike Skinner says the Max Roach tribute was pretty sweet and flowed way to good time to pack away the kit. Sorry. I got to learn how to read again or get better glasses. I think my eyes are starting to slip. Now, let's teleport from your beginnings to one of your most recent things, which was the tribute that Modern Drummer, our friends over there, did to the late, great Neil Peart. How did you get involved with that? And we all know that Neil's roots in music was Louis Bellson, Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, all that stuff. Is that kind of how you fit in there?
Well, there's a great story behind this one too, Dan. Dave Frangione, who is now the main man at Modern Drummer, I think he owns the thing there.
Yeah.
Who used to be a drum student of mine in Boston. See, he was at that time living in Boston, and I would play a club there in the 80s called Riles. It's still one of the most popular jazz clubs there, And so David would study drums with me. And then, being an Italian boy, he'd always say, hey, my mom wants to cook that pasta for you. So after the lesson, and come on over, and with the pots would be on, and a Sunday lunch with them would last 6 hours, meeting.
Nice.
Lunch into dinner with the wine and the whole thing, So Dave and I stayed in touch through all the years. I've been doing the Chicago Drum Show every year for about the past 8 years, and the NAMM shows most of the years too. So we'd see each other, And then when he got Modern Drummer, he actually is talking to me about putting out my drum books again in a new way, So I've got a few projects, on the stove right now with he and Dave Hakim. But anyway, so David Frangione said to me, I want you to play on the Modern Drummer Neil Peart festival, modern drum festival. So Bonnie, she's with me right now, by the way, Dan, in the room.
Hi, Bonnie.
Come in real quick. Come on, just one. Can she say real hi?
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
Here, real quick. No, but real quick. This is Dan.
He always does this to me. No makeup. I'm ready to
It's
work
okay.
out.
I don't have my makeup on either. How are you?
Now, Bon, I got to tell you one thing. Dan, no, hang on. You just asked about her singing Ipanema, right? Yes. I happen to have a pair of multi-rods now.
Oh, let's hear it.
She'll sing one chorus in Portuguese.
Okay. Ooh, I love it.
1, 2, 3.
Olha que coisa mais linda, mais cheia de graça. Ela, menina que vem que passa, o doce balança o caminho do mar.
Yay, that's great. Thank you for that. That's awesome.
Já fui to Brazil?
Yeah.
Yes, I asked you, in Brazil, do you know Brazil?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Have you been?
We haven't been yet, but it is so on our list. Our second largest following is Brazil on Drum Talk TV. Believe it or not. Yeah, we have over 1 million fans in Brazil.
That's one of the reasons I went there. I was studying music and dance in Brazil on a graduate fellowship because I loved it. And I was always studying African dance to get the groove in my body. And then I started studying percussion and met my own percussionist for the past 33 years now.
Yeah, it's literally a country whose culture is based on rhythm, really.
Well, guess why? The African slaves that were there to do the sugar cane and all the rest, just like the beautiful African rhythms came to the United States.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, thanks for sharing that with us. That was great.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
I wasn't even warmed up, so thanks for putting up with me.
Oh, you're great. It was wonderful. Thanks.
Enjoy, you guys. Nice to meet you.
You too. Thank you.
What you have to know is every time she sings, she's going to give me a bill for that later. So that's going to cost me.
The good news is the good news that it's only union scale, though. Or... That's awesome. So what did you tell everybody what you played with the Neil Peart Festival?
What was so cool about it, there's a combination of a rudiment. It's like a double paradiddle, Dan, that I based my solo on, but in an Afro-Cuban feel. So it was like doom 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 doom. So I based that to make it more like a melody, and I alternated the toms like the way Neil would do. He was very melodic, of course, very melodic player. And then I try to put in some rock fills that I kind of learned from him, So I put that little tribute to him in that way. And I'm currently endorsing Craviotto drums. I've been with Craviotto now for about 6 years, and I've got some beautiful sets in my studio in Amelia Island. So I was using my 20-inch bass drum, Red Sparkle, solid shells, of course, Craviotto kit, 6-piece kit, and I just improvised. And the wild thing was Bonnie just, I had to follow like, Cindy Blackman or, Santana, and she's got all the camera angles and all the mics on the drums and all the rockers, and then we did it on my cell phone. That's what we did it.
Perfect.
Bonnie was up there doing some angles and all that. And when David Frangione saw that, he said, "What studio did you use?" I said, on my cell phone. It was Bonnie, and she's got a great eye, to know how to make the visual interesting, And the sound was cool. So, I heard back what I played, and I said, okay, that cut, and I got the greatest compliment the next day when David Frangione called me and he said, I spoke to Neil's lawyer, who was his attorney for like 30 years. He's interviewed on the presentation, and he said Neil would have loved Les DeMerle's solo last night because it was really improvised, and so I was so that made my heart go like that, just we're really big. That's it.
That's awesome. You have been over the years with Slingerland, with Pearl, not Craviotto. I, by the way, have a soft spot for Slingerland because when I was 1975, I think. So how old was I? 12, 13. My parents added on to my 5-piece Pearl kit with 2 Slingerland concert toms.
Oh, wow.
So those are my smallest drums. My 2 biggest drums came only 2 years later or so, 1959 Slingerland pedal tune timpani drums, and I have those set up with my kit. Yeah, my dad ruined my planned future, which was to be an oceanographer, by taking me to see Led Zeppelin. I saw Led Zeppelin, and okay, forget this Jacques Cousteau BS. I want to be John Bonham. But I told my parents that after seeing them, I said, I want 2 things, and I'll do anything for them. And I was playing timpani drums in a concert band and orchestra in junior high, so I was very familiar with the instrument. I said I would like 2 timpani drums and an 8-string mandolin, which, by the way, check this out, everybody. I've never done this. That's my 8-string mandolin from 1977 up there. So they did indeed get me that, which at the time was like $140, 1977.
Yeah.
And one day, this guy pulls up in our driveway in a black van that says Mel Zelnick's Music Scene. Now, Mel Zelnick owned, or Music Stop, I'm sorry. It was Music Scene that I learned how to play. Sidney Kay, who played for Danny Kaye's orchestra. So Mel Zelnick owned Music Stop in Canoga Park. And, and somehow my parents found out that he had his 2 original timpani drums from the late 50s for sale. They bought them both for $700. I dug rosebush holes for my mother for 30 years for that.
Oh man, wow.
So Slingerland, Pearl, Craviotto, since you started playing professionally in the 60s, my question is, what's the biggest leap in drum gear progression over all these decades? Is it drum shells? Is it cymbals? Is it the hardware? Is it if you could pick one thing to kind of focus on, what do you think has made the biggest leap?
Well, in the beginning, Dan, first of all, I did want to say Canoga Park. I had done many clinics at the Music Stop for
Really? So you knew Mel.
Yeah.
They played with Artie Shaw and people like that of that.
Right. And also, I think Vic Salazar, Vic Salazar.
Yeah, of Chicago Drum Shop,
Yeah. But I think in the day when I was, what I would do is I would book, the reason I would do 50 clinics a year was because they would book them in Harry James's schedule. So instead of flying me out every day.
Wherever you were on tour.
Wherever we were, we'd get into town at 2:00 in the afternoon. I'd run and do a clinic, go home and have dinner, he'd take a shower in a hotel and be on stage with him that night, So the Music Stop was one of those many clinics, But getting back to your question, I think the first thing that impressed me about the early days of the drums was, like, for instance, when Rogers came out. I was playing Slingerland, and then Rogers came out with the Dynasonic,
Right.
So it was something that no other drum company had done, the bar on the bottom of a snare drum that would perfectly bring the snares up to the head, And so that innovation, and being in New York, they had an expo, a Rogers Drums Expo. I remember I went to it with Roy Burns, who was a friend of mine from Aquarian, And he in that period of time was probably in his 30s. I was a teenager, and he was playing around New York with jazz acts like Saul Yaget and Henry Red Allen, the Metropole, a lot of different clubs. And there were also Cozy Cole was one of the first Rogers guys, and then eventually Louis went with them, and of course Buddy did the albums on Argo, where he had the sextet. Playtime and Caravan. Those are Rogers. He's playing there, and he also played Rogers with Harry James's band for a while. But so that was one thing. Then also I wanted to play Rogers, and I got a Rogers kit too. I never had a Rogers endorsement. I went from Slingerland. I actually got a kit that I wanted to have of Rogers, but I was endorsed by Slingerland, And then after that, whatever the next innovative, change would have been, I wanted to know about. And Pearl was really, when they first came out, there were only about 15 of us in the catalog, the first catalog. It was Blakey and Shaughnessy and me and Johnny Guerin and a guy named John Drace, who's a good friend of mine from Las Vegas, and maybe one or two others. Mark Stevens, a percussionist from LA, and so they had the plexiglass drums, and the fiberglass drums and all. So that was new at that time. So we thought we had the hippest, newest car to drive, you know, that
so
kind
cool.
of thing. But then of course, from an artist point of view, I would go with a company that could help me book clinics and promote us. So
have good backline and stuff.
Yeah,
if you need support.
exactly. Knew the business that they would support an artist, you know.
Right.
And then, so anyway, that's the way the route that I took. But all the companies, I always had a great rapport with them, and especially the guys that like you say Zildjian. If you knew Lenny DiMuzio and Armin like I did, they were like they would do anything for you. You could be on the road and break a cymbal, which I never did, but you could be on the road and say you could pick up the phone, get Lenny on the phone. Okay, I'm going to overnight it to you. Bam, it's there. You know,
That's awesome.
It was that kind of commitment to all the artists that they had. You know.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to check the comments one more time, and then have one last very special question for you.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got Mike Skinner also says Ronnie Verrill was our homegrown big band hero in the UK. He's asking you if you ever got to play alongside Ronnie Verrill.
No, I met him, but I never got to play alongside of him. But I'm a big fan of what he does.
Cool.
And for what I remember, wasn't he the drummer who did the Muppets? Did he do?
Yeah, I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, I think he was and there was some really cool, like when there was that drum battle with Buddy Rich.
Yeah.
And Animal. I think that was Ronnie. I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I'm not sure about that, but I think so.
Kevin Gazzara is asking, when did you first play with Lionel Hampton?
When I was 16 years old.
But you don't want to say what year? You don't want anyone doing the math?
Well, I was
teasing.
Yeah, it would have been about 58, somewhere in there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But I've got a wild story if I can tell you, Dan, real quick.
Yeah, and someone is confirming that Ronnie was Animal on the website.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That's cool. That's cool. My story, real quick, about Lionel Hampton and playing with him at 16 was my dad took us to see him at the Metropole Cafe because my drum teacher said, Les is, meaning me, has got all the arrangements down. Take him to see Lionel Hampton. He's playing this weekend in New York. Now, my father wasn't a musician. He was a plumbing and heating contractor. And I'm a junior. My dad's name is Lester, of course, you know. Mm-hmm. So when the phone used to ring, my mother would say, they'd say, is Les or Lester there? My mother would say, you want the plumber or the drummer? You know.
That's hilarious.
So and then we'd take notes and put like I'd come home from school and say 48th and Broadway, Les. I'd go there only to find out they wanted a water heater installed.
And not a gig.
Another address, and it was a wedding that we were trying to book, you know.
That's
but
hilarious.
The story with Hamp is when I got to the Metropole to play with Lionel Hampton, I didn't go there to play with him. I went there to hear him. We paid to get in, but my father went up to him and said, Lionel, my kid's a drummer. Is there any way he could sit in with the band tonight? So Lionel said, no, you know, there's no way I'm going to have anybody sit in with my band, you know.
Who asked that? What are you, a plumber?
Yeah. So he came back and I asked my dad what he said, and he told me. I said, I could have told you that he's a big jazz star. He's not going to let me play, you know. Yeah. So anyway, Lionel at the end of the night said, okay, maybe, he said, my father went up to him. He says, listen, if you let Les play like tonight, the last tune of the night, I'll buy the whole band a drink. There's 17 musicians up there, you know.
Wow.
So, you know, he was a plumber and a politician, you know.
That is great. What a great
so what
story.
happened was I got to play. I get on the bandstand with Hamp, and Hamp says, okay, Les, what do you want to play? I said, well, how about How High the Moon, Hamp? He says, do you know the arrangement? I said, yeah. He said, what tempo? I said, any tempo you want. So he kicks it off, boo-doo-doo-boo-dee, ah, boo-doo-doo-wee, ah, ah, shoo-boo-boo-doo-dee, ah, boo-doo-doo-wee, ah, ah, and swinging like that. And I do the shout chorus and all that.
Yeah.
So I take my bow, and then my father goes up to Hamp, and he said, okay, Hamp, thanks for letting the kid play. How much do I owe you to buy the band a drink? He said, Pops, that kid can play. Forget the band. Buy me a double.
You were 16, right?
16, yeah.
In 1950. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Shout out to Lori Shoup, who's part of Drum Talk TV. Lori, how's it going? Seth also says, same here, Tony, 5-inch metal dino. Oh, now everyone's geeking out on gear since you brought up the dinosaur. That's hilarious. Yuri, how are you? So I got one question before we go with the legendary Les DeMerle's first Drum Talk TV interview. And my question is this. When you're not, and I know things are different now, so not just in the context of now not playing music, but through like the last 5-10 years, when you're not playing music, when you're not rehearsing, not recording, not doing clinics, not touring, not performing, what do you like to do? This is the Les DeMerle fun fact question. What do you like to do? I have a feeling you probably spend time with Bonnie doing blank. What would that be?
Yeah. Well, we every day, what we do, Dan, to stay healthy is we take long walks, and where we live in Amelia Island, we're only 1 mile from the beach. So in the mornings, we get up and we go to the beach, and then we take a serious power walk, to stay healthy. And nowadays it's so cool to just breathe that fresh air. We've been doing that here in Myrtle Beach. We're about 2 miles from the beach,
Yeah.
So we get up in the morning, we'll go, do the walk and then have a Starbucks, enjoy some good coffee. I love to play pool. I really dig playing pool. I like to bowl, and I want to get back into some tennis.
Nice.
And I always practice. I have, I'm right here at my desk here. I've got some sticks and multi-rod practice pad, and I'm working on a biography. Also, I'm working on my own biography now.
Oh, good for you. That's awesome.
So I've been trying to, rack my brains to go back to the early days, like the days we're speaking about.
Yeah.
And those are harder for me to remember all the details, all the sidemen, all the different logistics of getting gigs and stuff like that, than it is the stuff that's more current,
Yeah,
so
just do what I do. Just do what I do, Les, and just make up names. I tell everybody the last band I played in was Herschel Goldstein and the Bagel Slingers. No one will know.
Hey, I know that band.
Yeah, it was that polka metal bebop band.
Yeah. Right. I heard it.
Thanks for sharing your stories, and thanks for sharing your wisdom. And I would love to have you on again. And anytime you have something that you want to promote or talk about, just let me know, and we'll schedule this and do it again. It was a lot of fun, and a very special appearance by your wife, Bonnie Eisel, doing some Portuguese version of Girl from Ipanema, which was awesome. That was great. I can't wait to show the replay to my wife. She'll love it, because like I said, we used to perform that.
Dan, one thing I'm really focusing on now is setting up my studio for Zoom lessons,
Great.
And, it's funny, there's a whole lot of incredible work out there right now, but I'm going to focus on big band playing, like to help high school musicians get into college bands.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Because that's like a niche that's not explored a lot. And also, I have a certain technique. It's a combination of the molar system, some finger control, and playing a traditional grip that I'd love to share with everyone. So if you're interested in my lessons, I have a website, lesdemerle.com.
I'm going to put it in the comments, folks. And Stephen, please pin it after I type it. So it's www.lesdemerle.com.
Yeah, and you could just click on teaching, or you can reach me at my website, LDMM. That's like my name, Les DeMerle Music, LDMM at bellsouth.net. And it would be my pleasure to share more information and technique with the drummers of the world. We're all in this together.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So there you go, Steve. If you don't mind, please pinning that comment. And Les, we'll stay in touch. Stay on the line after we say goodbye. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in with Les DeMerle and myself here on Drum Talk TV. What a great way to wind down the year with such a legendary swing, jazz, and big band drummer. Again, from replacing Buddy Rich with the Harry James Orchestra all the way fast forward to being part of the modern drummer Neil Peart tribute. Just what an amazing career. Wayne Newton, it goes on and on. I'm sure there's some more stories up your sleeve, sir.
Oh, yes. Many, many more.
Great. We'll have to do this again. Hang on the line, and thank you, everybody, for following what we do. Tomorrow, well, depending on when you're watching this, what's the date tomorrow? The 14th, same time, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. We're going from jazz and all of that fun stuff to metal. We got Casey Carrillo on from Queensryche, who's also an awesome funk drummer. That'll be fun. So join me for that. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful, safe weekend, and be kind to each other, or I'll find you. Bye, everybody.